Welcome back. Now, China has reported 57 new COVID-19 cases, the highest since April 13th, prompting fresh lockdowns to prevent a second wave. Meanwhile, Brazil has reported 892 more fatalities from the coronavirus, taking the countrywide death toll to over 42,000. In the US, 759 more people have died overnight as the country's death toll surges to more than 115,000. Worldwide, the death count is nearing 430,000, while infections have jumped to over 7.7 million. More details in this report.
With thousands of new coronavirus deaths and cases being reported on a daily basis, the pandemic shows no signs of abating soon. In the US, 21 states have seen an increase in their average daily new infections this week. Meanwhile, China has seen a new cluster of cases outbreak in Beijing, which has been linked to the city's largest wholesale market.
These coronavirus cases have perhaps come in contact with the polluted environment in the market, or have come in contact with someone who was infected, who then passed on the virus to them, so they had it. For this reason, shutting down Shinfa, the agriculture trading market, is completely necessary. The relevant tracing work is still underway.
As COVID-19 caseload surpassed 225,000 across the African continent, 43 countries are now under full border closure due to the rapid spread of the virus. The highly affected African countries include South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Djibouti, Nigeria and Algeria. Spain has made it mandatory to wear masks in public after the country's state of emergency ends on June 21st. Health Minister Salvador Illa said these measures will stay in place until a cure or vaccine for the coronavirus is found.
The Royal Decree picks up a series of preventive measures and hygiene, and I want to highlight the use of face masks under the terms you already know, when you cannot have a distance of more than 1.5 meters.
South Korea has also confirmed 34 more coronavirus cases in a continuation of an upward trend in new infections.
Now, Pakistan has reported its highest one-day surge in COVID-19 cases with 6,825 new infections. This takes the tally of infections to more than 139,000. The Health Ministry says 81 more people lost their lives overnight, taking the death toll to 2,632. It says over 51,000 patients of coronavirus have recovered so far. Officials say the province of Punjab has the highest number of cases at more than 52,000, while Sindh has recorded more than 51,000. In a televised address, Prime Minister Imran Khan ruled out further lockdowns, saying Pakistan cannot continue keeping its economy shut. Now, the Afghan Interior Ministry says the Taliban have killed or wounded 422 security forces in various attacks in the past week alone. In a tweet, the National Security Council spokesman Javed Faisal said the ongoing attacks by the Taliban could jeopardize intra-Afghan peace efforts. Officials of the Interior Ministry and the NSC also accused the group of killing pro-government religious scholars in two recent attacks in Kabul. But the Taliban have denied involvement in the attacks on the Wazir Akbar Khan and Sher Shah Suri mosques. This comes as the two sides are aiming to start the intra-Afghan talks to end the decades-long war in the country. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Office has strongly condemned the attacks on the two mosques. Now, Luxembourg says the EU's recognition of Palestine would become inevitable if Israel moves forward with its plan to annex the occupied West Bank. In an interview, Foreign Minister Jean Asselborn called for a tougher EU stance against Tel Aviv's plans that has been met with stern opposition worldwide. He said it would be a humiliation for the bloc to simply write reproachful letters. Asselborn suggested strong measures like economic sanctions if Israel carries out the annexation. The foreign minister said such a decision would not require a unanimous decision by all the 27 member states. The annexation plan is slated to begin from July 1st. Officials from Jordan, Saudi Arabia and Egypt have already condemned the controversial plan and warned Israel against it. Moving on, 6 people have been killed after ISIS terrorists stormed a home in Iraq's eastern Diyala province. Security forces said 6 others were also wounded in the attack. They said an operation to track down terrorists is underway. In recent months, ISIS militants have stepped up attacks, particularly in the area between Kirkuk, Salahuddin and Diyala. In 2017, Iraq declared victory over the terrorist outfit by reclaiming all of its territory, but the group still maintains sleeper cells in large areas of Iraq and periodically launches attacks. Militants have killed 60 people, including 20 soldiers and 40 civilians, in twin attacks in Nigeria's northeast Borno state. The civilian task force said hundreds of others are wounded in the attacks in the Monguno and Ganzai local areas. The task force said the militants also burned down the UN's humanitarian hub in the area and set a police station on fire. It said fighters arrived on motorcycles and in pickup trucks with heavy weaponry, including rocket launchers. Boko Haram and its offshoot, ISWAP, have claimed responsibility for both the attacks. These attacks come just days after armed fighters killed at least 81 people in a raid on a village in Gubbio area. Now, 2 peacekeepers with the UN forces have been killed in an attack on their convoy in the north of Mali. In a statement, the UN mission said unidentified armed individuals attacked the logistics convoy on the Tessa-Late Gao road. The UN mission has 13,000 troops from several nations deployed across the vast, semi-arid country. Mali is struggling to contain a militant insurgency that broke out in 2012, which has claimed thousands of military and civilian lives. Moving on, Turkey says it has killed 2 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in airstrikes during a counter-terrorist operation in northern Iraq. The National Defense Ministry said the military carried out the operation backed by air power in the Zap and Avashin Basyan regions. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapons caches and shelters used by the terrorists. Turkish security forces also claimed killing the pre-KK militants in northern Syria, near Turkey's southern border. It said over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 5 months. State media said PKK militants often use northern Iraq to plan cross-border terrorist attacks in Turkey. Now, Russia and Turkey have postponed ministerial-level talks which were expected to focus on Libya and Syria. Moscow's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu had been set to visit Turkey today. Ankara's foreign ministry said Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu and his Russian counterpart decided to put off the talks during a phone call. It said the deputy ministers of the 2 countries will continue talks in the period ahead, but it said the minister-level talks will be held at a later date. Earlier this week, the UN said that the Libya's warring sides had started a new round of ceasefire talks. Russia, UAE and Egypt back renegade warlord Khalifa Haftar, while Turkey supports the UN-backed government. Pope Francis has appealed the warring sides of Libya to seek peace and urged the international community to facilitate talks. Addressing at St. Peter's Square, the pontiff said he was pained by the situation in Libya. He said the international community must search for a path to end the violence and help establish stability in the country. Francis said the already precarious health conditions of refugees and asylum seekers had also been aggravated. Following the ouster of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya is divided between the Libyan National Army and the rival UN-backed government based in Tripoli. Moving on, the Yemeni government says the Southern Transitional Council has withdrawn from the Riyadh agreement. In November 2019, Saudi-backed Yemeni government and UAE-backed separators struck a power-sharing agreement in Riyadh. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Mohammed al-Hadrami has also accused the separatists of seizing a money-laden vehicle of the central bank. He said continuous violations are proof the council has left the Riyadh agreement. The minister said the international community should accept the SDC as a rebellious entity that has lost its legitimacy. The government and council signed another agreement in April to implement the Riyadh agreement. Iran says it is ready to retaliate against the US if they interfere in Venezuela-bound Iranian oil. State media said Iran's naval forces will prepare targets against the United States if they stop the oil tankers. It said last month the Iranian forces were ordered to track several US merchant vessels in the Gulf. Tehran said it will continue the shipments if Caracas requests more after it sent a flotilla of 5 tankers of fuel to Venezuela in May. Iran summoned the Swiss ambassador in Tehran last month over possible measures Washington could take against the Iranian tankers. Both Iran and Venezuela are under US sanctions. Now, China's GPS replacement is taking shape as the last satellite in the Beidou navigation satellite system and will be launched in a few days. In a statement, China's Satellite Navigation Office said the spacecraft has undergone technical checks in southwestern Sichuan province. Satellite will be launched from Weishang Satellite Launch Center by a Long March 3A rocket. China has been working to replace the Global Positioning System, a US product, since the last 2 decades. A total of 59 satellites and 3 generations have put into use, and the Beidou 3 is said to be more accurate than the GPS. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, moving on with the news stories. In the United States, fresh protests against police brutality have erupted after police fatally shot a black man in the city of Atlanta. Angry demonstrators shut down a major highway, blocked an interstate, and set fire to a restaurant. This report has more.
Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Verona Taylor, Oscar Grant, Ayanna Jones, Darren Wilson, George Floyd. The list goes on. Rayshard Brooks, the 27-year-old Atlanta native, joins the long list of victims of racist police brutality in the U.S. Police says he resisted arrest after failing a sobriety check and taking an officer's taser at a fast food drive-thru. A spokesperson for Atlanta police says the officer who fatally shot Brooks has been terminated, while Police Chief Arika Shields has resigned.
While there may be debate as to whether this was an appropriate use of deadly force, I firmly believe that there is a clear distinction between what you can do and what you should do. I do not believe that this was a justified use of deadly force and have called for the immediate termination of the officer.
Meanwhile, the lawyer representing Brooks' family, Chris Stewart, has disputed the official's account. He said witnesses told his team that they did not see the police conduct a field sobriety test on Brooks. Stewart said a taser is not a deadly weapon and you can't shoot somebody unless they are pointing a gun at you.
I could even say we want justice, but I don't even care anymore. I don't even know what that is. And I've been doing this for 15 years. I don't know what justice is anymore. Is it getting them arrested? Is it getting somebody fired? Is it a chief stepping down? I know that this isn't justice, what's happening in society right now.
This comes during global protest and discussion on racism and police violence following the custodial killing of George Floyd last month in Minneapolis.
Well, clashes have broken out during Black Lives Matter protests in major European countries. In France, at least 15,000 anti-racism protesters gathered in central Paris attempting to hold a march that was banned. Police fired tear gas as officers moved against the protesters who hurled stones at the law enforcement agencies. The rally was organized under the banner Justice for Adama Traoré, a young black man who died in French police custody in 2016. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, over 100 people have been arrested following violent protests in London. Far-right activists gathered to protect statues, attacked police and anti-racism protesters. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Interior Minister Priti Patel condemned protests outside Westminster by far-right groups.
I would urge everybody else not to protest, not to participate in these mass gatherings. This is a threat to public health, but also we're seeing a small minority use these gatherings to subvert particular causes and to participate in thuggery and violence. That is simply wrong. And as I've said, they will face the full force of the law.
Also in New Zealand, thousands of people attended Black Lives Matter protests as Auckland's Queen Street. Now, moving on, Poland has admitted to briefly invading the Czech Republic last month, as Polish troops guarding the frontier took up positions by a chapel on the Czech side of the border. In a statement, the Polish Defense Ministry said it was a mistake and not a deliberate act, and both sides resolved it immediately. The Czech Foreign Ministry says the Polish military had no hostile intention, but it has yet to receive an official explanation. Officials said soldiers are no longer present in the area and Czech citizens can visit the site freely. The troops deployed for coronavirus measures apparently stayed inside Czech territory for several days. Czech authorities eventually intervened by contacting Warsaw. Now, North Korea has warned of possible military retaliation against South Korea over Seoul's failure to stop defecators' propaganda campaign. In a statement, North Korean Supreme Leader's sister, Kim Yong-jong, said she has given instruction for decisive next action. Across the border, Seoul's Unification Ministry urged Pyongyang to honor the existing inter-Korean agreement. Meanwhile, South's Defense Ministry said the military is ready to respond to any situation and it is closely monitoring moves by the North Korean army. These developments come amid increasing tensions in the Korean peninsula over anti-Pyongyang leaflets coming in from the south. South Korea says it has taken stern actions against the agitators, but Pyongyang has accused Seoul of making empty promises. President Vladimir Putin claims Russia has handled the coronavirus pandemic better than the United States. In an interview, Putin said Russia is emerging from the novel coronavirus epidemic with minimal losses. He said Russian authorities at federal and regional level had worked as a unit without disagreements, unlike those in the United States. He added that, unlike the US, no one in Russia goes against the instructions of the government. Putin further said that the virus was exposed Washington's deep internal crisis. With nearly 529,000 confirmed cases, Russia has the third highest number of infections after Brazil and the United States. Russia's official death toll stands close to 7,000, much lower than most countries. India has reported its highest single-day spike in coronavirus cases as nearly 12,000 more people tested positive. The country has now become the world's fourth worst affected, with over 320,000 infections. The Health Ministry said 300 more people have lost their lives, taking the countrywide death toll to almost 9,200. It said major cities like Delhi, Mumbai and Chennai are badly affected. Earlier, the Supreme Court sought a report from New Delhi authorities saying patients face a horrendous situation in packed hospitals. The city needs 80,000 hospital beds by the end of next month, but currently has only 11,000. British drug maker AstraZeneca has reached a deal with European governments to supply the region with its potential vaccine against COVID-19. Germany, France, Italy and the Netherlands signed the contract for pre-orders of up to 400 million doses with the pharmaceutical company. Talking to media, the company's chief executive Pascal Soriot said, based on initial data, he has good hopes that the vaccine will work. Soriot said British authorities approved the start of phase 3 trials after studies showed sufficient efficacy and safety. He said China, Brazil, Japan and Russia have also expressed interest in the drug. Deliveries of vaccine are expected to start by the end of 2020. The death toll from oil tanker explosion in China's eastern Zhejiang province has risen to 19. Officials say over 170 people were injured in the blast. Officials say an oil tanker caught fire and exploded on an expressway in Taizhou city. A second blast took place when the blown-up truck fell onto a workshop, collapsing some residential houses and factory workshops. The vice mayor said over 2,600 rescue personnel, 151 vehicles and over 30 large rescue machinery and equipment were on site. About 77 of the injured being treated at the First People's Hospital of Wendling are suffering from burns, trauma and craniocerebral injuries.
Experts from our province, Wenzhou City and Taizhou City, are working together to save the victims. We're providing case-by-case treatment to each victim with a group of doctors and nurses and are now making every effort to save the patients.
The death toll from a ship packed with African migrants that sank off the Tunisian coast this week has risen to 61. Officials say the Coast Guard recovered more bodies, including that of a baby. Dozens had set out on the vessel from Tunisia's Kerkena Island the previous weekend, aiming to reach Italy. The UN says attempts to reach the Italian coast from Tunisia have increased by 150% in the first 4 months of the year. The Tunisia representative for the UNHCR, Hanan Hamdan, has expressed concern and alarm over this new trend. The International Organization for Migration has rescued 20 migrants off Libya's western coast after their boat capsized. The organization's Libya's chief of mission, Federico Souda, says 12 others are still missing. The organization said the migrants' boat departed from the western city of SABIHA, 45 kilometers west of the capital Tripoli. Since the violence erupted in the country in 2011, Libya has become a preferred point of departure for illegal immigrants who want to cross into Europe. Thousands of illegal immigrants in Libya who are either rescued from the sea remain detained in overcrowded shelters. The United Nations has warned that 3/4 of the aid programs in war-stricken Yemen can close in the coming weeks without more funding. This comes as the country is facing the world's worst humanitarian crisis, exacerbated by COVID-19 and cholera. The UN said it needs a fundraising target of $2.4 billion in order to prevent severe cutbacks. Earlier, international donors pledged $1.35 billion in humanitarian aid to the war-torn country, but the U.S. Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs spokesperson Jens Lark said only half has been paid so far. Venezuela's economy has collapsed under a hyperinflationary crisis. People in the outskirts of the capital are forced to build and live in mud and bamboo homes. It is another sign of declining living standards amid the 6-year economic crisis. Details in this report.
Venezuela is suffering from the worst economic crisis, while the crumbling infrastructure has left millions of people in poverty. Locals are facing catastrophic nationwide blackouts, hyperinflation, food shortage and disease. Some families on the outskirts of Caracas are expanding a settlement of mud and bamboo homes, lacking running water, power and sewer services. The dwellings in the community, known as lost trailers, have sloping walls, low ceilings and sparse furniture. Resident Adriani Morcano is desperate about the economic situation.
People who don't steal have to steal to support their children. Someone who doesn't do bad things has to do them, and it should not be this way.
The families get water from a nearby well or fill a 150-liter for $1. Many cook with makeshift stoves using paper or plastic to light damp firewood.
We don't have any gas and we have to cook with firewood. Now electricity is a problem as well. It rains and the power goes out. We are adrift here.
The United Nations says Venezuela in 2019 suffered the 4th most severe food crisis in the world, with 9.3 million people suffering hunger or inadequate nutrition.
Sometimes we get 100 bolivars and it isn't enough for our children. Sometimes he asks me for food and how can I tell him that I don't have any? I have to go out and look for food or call my husband for him to bring food. Sometimes we go all day without eating. It is very hard.
According to the UN Economic Commission, the disparity between the rise in prices and population salaries is so generalized that there is practically not a single Venezuelan who is not poor.
Well, with the pandemic wrecking the economies around the world, a zoo in Peru has called for help to pay for upkeep and food for its over 1,000 animals. The authorities say they are scrambling to find resources amid a plunge in ticket sales, but have launched a campaign hoping it will provide some funds. More in this report.
At Lima's Huachipa Zoological Park, tigers, camels and giraffes look forlornly out at the paths where visitors normally crowd together for a peek at the wildlife. Huachipa's chief of fauna says the coronavirus pandemic has left the park in a complicated situation as it looks ghostly.
The zoo looks ghostly. You don't see anyone at all on the paths like we used to. The place is desolate. It's just the animals who are also used to the public visitors. We do interactive workshops and everything. This place looks ghostly.
The management at the zoo has come up with an online campaign asking for donations. It also offers people to purchase advance tickets at a 25% discount.
The situation with the pandemic has complicated things for us in the economic aspect. We have our resources covered for the moment, but they will run out soon and we're still surviving. But the situation is very complicated, really very complicated.
The COVID crisis has marred Peru's veneer of economic progress. The country has recorded 6,308 deaths and over 220,000 infections so far, the second highest in Latin America.
Pakistan's foremost leading film actress SABIHA KHANUM has passed away in the United States at the age of 84. In a Facebook post, her family said the actress was suffering from renal disease and spent her last days in the state of Virginia. KHANUM is remembered as the First Lady of Pakistan's silver screen. The iconic actress ruled Pakistani cinema in 1950s and 60s with super hit movies. KHANUM acted in iconic movies including Kaneez, Mukhra, Anokha, Tehzeeb and many others. She gave award-winning performances in films during the 1980s and 1990s as well. KHANUM was conferred upon with the Pride of Performance Award by the government of Pakistan in 1986. Well, business news are coming next after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, the Gulf stock markets are trading lower as investors remain cautious about the pace of economic recovery. Market participation by investors remained muted as volumes continue to fall. Dubai's DFM General Index has lost as much as 2%, extending this year's loss to 25%, with bank stocks weighing on its performance. Equity markets in Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait and Bahrain have also declined between 0.3% and 1.3%. In Riyadh, the Tadawul al-Share index has dropped by 0.5% as Saudi Aramco stocks fell 0.5%. Well, in the weather update, Typhoon NURI has hit China's southern Guangdong province, becoming the first storm to make a landfall in the country this year. Guangdong's Met Services said NURI landed as a tropical storm packing winds of 82.8 kilometers per hour near its center. Authorities in Guangdong have raised the local emergency response to level 3. China's Met Center has renewed the blue alert for typhoon and the yellow alert for rainstorms. The government agency said the southern part of China and the Hainan Island will have heavy rains and rainstorms in the next 2 days. The State Flood Control and Drought Relief Headquarters issued advisories to coastal provinces and launched a Level 4 emergency response. The Met authorities have advised ships to return and cautioned against floods and geological disasters in the regions. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can always follow us on social media as Indus.News. Take care.